The first time I heard it, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. It was late, past midnight, and I was driving home through the empty streets of Haydenfield. The town had always been quiet at night, but this was different. The silence felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel as I flipped through the radio stations, searching for anything to fill the emptiness. That's when it happened. The radio froze on 107.3 FM. I didn't remember stopping there, but the static faded, replaced by a melody so strange, so hauntingly familiar, that I felt it settle deep into my bones. It wasn't like any song I'd ever heard, yet somehow I knew it. A slow, looping tune, simple yet unsettling, like a lullaby played just slightly out of tune. A chill ran down my spine. I tried changing the station, but the dial wouldn't budge. I switched the radio off. The music kept playing. I swallowed hard, pressing the power button again, harder this time. Still, the melody droned on, whispering through the speakers like it had always been there, waiting for me to notice. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the song stopped. The radio let out a sharp burst of static, then fell silent. I drove the rest of the way home in complete quiet, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had convinced myself it was just a malfunction, some weird signal interference. It had to be. I was wrong. The next morning, as I walked into Joe's diner for my usual coffee, I heard someone humming. The same melody. An old man sitting at the counter was tapping his fingers against his mug, his lips moving silently to the tune. His eyes were distant, unfocused. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. I stepped closer. "Hey, sir, what's that song you're humming?" He turned his head slowly, as if waking from a dream. His eyes locked onto mine, dull and empty. I don't know," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's just been stuck in my head since this morning." My stomach twisted. Across the diner, someone else, this time a young waitress, was humming the exact same tune. And outside, in the parking lot, a man sitting in his car had his radio on. 107.3 FM, and the song was still playing. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was at the diner. It was a small place, the kind where the waitresses knew your usual order, and the coffee was always slightly burnt but comforting. That morning, I had come in to get breakfast and ask around about the new radio station. I didn't have any big theories yet, just a gut feeling that something about it was off. The place was quiet, except for the clinking of forks on plates and the low murmur of conversation. But then I heard it, the song. Faint, like a whisper beneath everything else. At first, I thought someone had left a radio on. But as I glanced around, I realized something worse. The customers weren't just eating. They were humming. Every single one of them. Some barely moved their lips. Others tapped their fingers on the table in rhythm. A man near the window stared blankly at his coffee as his foot tapped along to the melody. Even Sarah, the waitress who had been serving me for years, hummed softly under her breath as she refilled my cup. I shifted in my seat. "Sarah," I said, trying to sound casual. "What song is that?" She paused, as if she hadn't even noticed she was humming. Then she laughed lightly and shrugged. "Oh, I don't know. Just stuck in my head, I guess." That answer sent a chill down my spine. "Where'd you hear it?" She frowned, thinking. "Not sure. Probably the radio." She glanced at the small speaker in the corner, which was playing an old country song. Definitely not the same tune. I opened my mouth to ask something else, but before I could, a fork clattered to the floor. An elderly man at the counter had stopped moving entirely, his food untouched, his gaze locked straight ahead. His lips moved, soundless, as if he was whispering something to himself. The humming in the diner grew louder, like a wave building up before crashing down. I felt something claw at my mind, a pull I couldn't explain. My fingers twitched as if they wanted to tap along. The melody scratched at the edges of my thoughts. I needed to get out. I threw some money on the table and hurried outside, the door swinging shut behind me. The air felt thick, heavy. Even out here, the humming continued. A group of teenagers sat on the curb, one of them absently drumming his hands against his knees in a slow, steady rhythm. I reached my car and yanked the door open. The radio was already on. I hadn't turned it on. 107.3 FM. The same song. I slammed the power button, but the music kept playing. I grabbed the volume knob, twisting it to 0, It didn't change a thing. The song kept playing. Not from the radio. From somewhere inside my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with this town. The song wasn't just a song. It was spreading, slipping into people's minds like a parasite. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just a strange coincidence, a local oddity. But when I walked into Joe's diner that morning and saw nearly every customer humming the same tune, my stomach twisted. Their eyes looked distant, like they weren't fully there. Even Joe, the grumpy old man who had been running this place for years, had the radio locked on a 107.3 FM, a strange smile frozen on his face. I sat at the counter and waved at him. "Hey, Joe." He didn't respond. He just wiped the same spot on the counter over and over, humming that damn melody under his breath. "Joe." I tried again, louder this time. He flinched, as if waking from a dream, and turned toward me. His eyes flickered with something off. "You okay?" I asked. Joe blinked. His lips parted like he was about to say something, but all that came out was a low, static-filled hum, like the sound of an old radio, struggling to tune in. I felt my chest tighten. I threw a few dollars on the counter and left in a hurry. A name from the past. Back in my apartment, I pulled out my old notebook of town history. Being a journalist meant I had dug into Haydenfield's past more times than I could count. I flipped through pages filled with half-finished notes and faded newspaper clippings until I found it. James Holloway. I barely remembered him, but his name had come up a few times when I first moved here. A radio mogul. A genius in sound technology, they said. 10 years ago, he ran WHFN 103.6, the only real radio station in town. Then, one day he vanished. No explanation. No farewell message. Just gone. Some said he went insane, experimenting with subliminal audio to control people's minds. Others believed he discovered something he wasn't supposed to. Either way, his station shut down overnight, and the building was left to rot. Now, after all these years, a mysterious new frequency suddenly appears, playing a song that no one can stop listening to. This wasn't a coincidence. The note. As I sat there, staring at my notes, I heard something slide under my front door. A piece of paper. My heartbeat quickened as I picked it up. The edges were crumpled, as if someone had been gripping it tightly before deciding to let go. There were only 6 words written in jagged black ink. "Find Holloway before the song takes you." A chill ran down my spine. I shot up and ran to my door, yanking it open, but the hallway was empty. The lights flickered, and for a brief second, I swore I could hear that melody playing somewhere far away. Who left this? And how did they know I was looking in a Holloway? I didn't have time to think. I grabbed my jacket and keys. There was only one place to go, the abandoned WHFN station. I drove through the empty streets of Haydenfield, the radio off, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. The town had changed. People moved slower, their eyes vacant, their expressions distant. Those who still spoke to me hummed, under their breath, the same eerie melody from 107.3 FM. I tried not to listen, but the tune found its way into my head anyway, sneaking in through the cracks of my mind. WHFN had been abandoned for years, a relic of a time when local radio still mattered. The station sat on the outskirts of town, its rusted tower looming against the overcast sky. A heavy chain locked the front doors, but I wasn't interested in going through the front. Sam had mentioned something once, back when he worked maintenance here, a storage basement that had been sealed off long before the station shut down. If there were answers, that's where I'd find them. The entrance was hidden behind the station, buried beneath overgrown weeds and broken concrete. I cleared away the debris, revealing a rusted metal hatch. A single word was painted across it in faded red letters. Restricted. I hesitated. Something about this felt wrong, like I was about to step into a place that wasn't meant for me, or for anyone. But the song was getting louder in my head, as if urging me forward. I gritted my teeth and pulled hard on the handle. It groaned in protest before finally giving way. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, mildew, and something metallic like old wires and rusted machines. I pulled out my flashlight and descended a short metal staircase, the walls narrowing around me as I went deeper underground. The air grew thick, heavy, like I was breathing something stale and forgotten. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a long corridor lined with rusted filing cabinets and old broadcasting equipment covered in dust. The walls were covered in sound wave charts, strange symbols scribbled between the lines. Tapes were stacked haphazardly on shelves, some labeled, others marked only with scratches. I reached for one at random, my fingers brushing against the tape, recorder resting nearby. I pressed play. Static filled the room, crackling and shifting like a living thing. Then, a voice emerged from the distortion, low, fragmented, layered with something unnatural beneath it. "The song is a door," the voice said. "Once opened, it cannot be closed." My skin crawled. The voice belonged to James Holloway. I clicked the recorder off and exhaled, my breath shaky. I scanned the room, trying to make sense of it all. Holloway had been experimenting with something down here, something beyond simple radio waves. There were blueprints for signal expansion devices, schematics of the town's electrical grid, and handwritten notes that made little sense. "It hears us. It adapts. The frequency is not from here. Do not listen too long." A deep hum vibrated through the walls, so low I felt it in my bones. My flashlight flickered. The bunker suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Then, the radio in the corner switched on by itself. A distorted version of the song played, warped and uneven, like a broken transmission. But beneath the melody, I heard something else, something shifting, whispering, just beyond the range of human comprehension. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned to leave, but the humming grew louder. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut with a metallic clang. I wasn't alone down here. A shadow moved in the corner of my eye, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the old equipment, the dust, the tapes, and the growing sense that something was watching me. I forced myself to move, shoving aside debris, my heart hammering in my chest. The door was locked. My hands trembled as I banged on it, hoping, praying, that I wasn't trapped. Then, just as suddenly as it had closed, the door creaked open on its own. I didn't wait to question it. I scrambled up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut behind me. As I stood there, breathing heavily, I realized something chilling. The song wasn't just playing in my head anymore. It was humming through the air, whispering from the shadows, waiting for me to listen. I woke up to the sound of humming. At first, I thought it was just in my head, a leftover echo from my dreams. But as I sat up, rubbing my tired eyes, I realized it wasn't coming from me. The humming was coming from outside, faint, rhythmic, and eerily familiar. I checked my clock. 3:12 a.m. The street outside my window was bathed in a cold, bluish glow from the flickering streetlights. Normally, the town would be dead silent at this hour, but tonight, there was movement. Shadows drifted along the sidewalks, slow and aimless. People. I pushed the curtain aside. A dozen figures stood in the middle of the road, facing in different directions, their heads slightly tilted. Their lips moved in unison, forming a soft, breathy hum. The tune was unmistakable, the same looping melody from 107.3 FM. A shiver crawled up my spine. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts, call Sam, but my hands were clammy, and I nearly dropped it. Before I could hit call, something else caught my attention. Across the street, Mrs. Levitt, my elderly neighbor, stood motionless on her porch. She was in her nightgown, her thin frame swaying slightly. Her radio, usually reserved for classical music, was blasting the same song on full volume. I stepped back from the window, my pulse quickening. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I had to get to Sam. Throwing on a jacket, I moved quickly through my house, careful to avoid making too much noise. I didn't know why, but I felt like I shouldn't attract attention. When I opened my front door, the air outside was strangely heavy, thick with an odd vibration, like an electrical hum beneath the surface of reality. The closer I got to the street, the more I could feel it in my bones. I kept my head down and moved fast. Sam lived only a few blocks away, but as I walked, I realized the situation was worse than I thought. More people stood frozen on their lawns, in their driveways, even in the middle of the road. Some were humming. Others just stared into the darkness, their mouths slightly open. Their eyes were blank, unfocused. A car was parked in the middle of an intersection, its driver's side door hanging open. The headlights were still on, illuminating a man slumped over the wheel, his fingers twitching in rhythm with the song. I swallowed hard and kept going. When I reached Sam's house, I hesitated. His front door was ajar. The porch light flickered. I stepped inside. Sam. My voice felt too loud in the eerie stillness. The entire house smelled like static, like the inside of an old television. I moved toward the living room, where Sam kept his radio equipment. The room was in disarray, papers scattered, a chair knocked over. In the center of it all, his radio sat on the desk, glowing with an unnatural light. The dial was set to 107.3 FM. And Sam was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall. His eyes were open, but he didn't see me. He was humming. I knelt beside him. Sam, hey, can you hear me? I shook his shoulders. He barely reacted. His lips kept moving, the sound escaping him in a mindless drone. His face was pale, his skin cold. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the radio and yanked the plug from the wall. The music cut off instantly, but the damage was already done. Sam didn't stop humming. I sat back, my breathing unsteady. I had no idea what to do. Then I heard it, an unnatural crackle, like a whisper buried under layers of static. The radio was still on, even though it was unplugged. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led down a path I wasn't supposed to take. The house at the edge of town was more unsettling than I'd imagined. The air around it felt thick, like it was holding its breath. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet seemed too loud, too deliberate. I couldn't help but think of the townspeople who had vanished or gone mad, and I wondered if this place, this house, was the reason. I stepped through the rusted gate, which groaned under the weight of the wind, and approached the front door. It was a faded brown, peeling at the edges, and the windows were so covered in grime I could barely see inside. I knocked. No answer. I pushed the door open, the hinges protesting like they hadn't been touched in years. Inside, it was like stepping into the past. The walls were lined with shelves, cluttered with old radios, wires, and tangled cords. There were no lights, only the pale moonlight filtering through the dusty windows. The room smelled of mildew and something else I couldn't quite place, like burnt wood and metal. I took a deep breath, ignoring the unease creeping up my spine, and made my way through the cluttered house. The living room was like a museum of failed technology, old radios, some still with broken dials, others with strange markings scratched into their surfaces. It felt like the room itself had been abandoned by time. But I wasn't here for the history. I was here for one thing: James Holloway. I had found traces of him in the town's records, bits of old news stories that spoke of a man who once controlled the airwaves, only to disappear into thin air after his so-called experiments. People whispered he had been obsessed with controlling minds through sound, using hidden frequencies and subliminal messages. The disappearance of Holloway was supposed to be the end of it all, but here I was, standing in his house, searching for answers. I pushed through a door at the back of the house, leading into what looked like a basement. The air was colder here, and the silence pressed against my ears. Down the narrow stairs, I saw something that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the broken furniture or the stacks of papers. It was what was at the center of the room. A large, makeshift recording studio, cobbled together from old equipment and half-built machines. And there, sitting in the middle of it all, was James Holloway. But he wasn't the man I had expected. His body was slouched in a worn chair, his face illuminated by the dim glow of a half-broken monitor. His hair was wild, and his eyes were like mirrors, reflecting something I couldn't see, something beyond this world. "David," he said, his voice raspy and distant, like he hadn't spoken in years. "I've been waiting for you." I froze, every instinct telling me to run, but I couldn't. My legs felt like stone. I stepped forward, my breath shallow, and asked the question that had been building in my mind. "What happened, Holloway? What is this? What's going on with the station? The song?" Holloway's lips twisted into a crooked smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The song, David," he said, his voice suddenly full of something darker, "isn't what you think it is. It isn't a song at all." I felt my heart race. "What do you mean?" "It's driving people insane. It's taking over the town." He tilted his head, his gaze flickering like he was trying to focus on something far away. "It's a signal, a transmission from somewhere else." He paused, his hand trembling as he reached for a nearby stack of old papers. "The music you hear, The tune that gets stuck in your head. It's not a creation of man. It's a doorway. Once it opens, it doesn't close. I stepped back, my mind struggling to catch up with his words. A doorway? What are you talking about? Holloway chuckled softly, the sound hollow and echoing in the small, dark room. You think I'm mad, don't you? I've lost my mind. But I've seen it, David. I've heard it. His voice dropped to a whisper, his eyes widening with a kind of fevered intensity. The song is just the beginning. You're already hearing it. You're already in its grip. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what he was saying. What do you want from me, Holloway? He smiled again, but this time it was colder, sharper. I want you to understand. This town, these people, everything, it's all a part of the signal. They don't even realize it. It's already inside them. I looked around the room, suddenly feeling like the walls were closing in. The radios hummed softly, and for a moment, I thought I heard the faint melody of the song in the distance. I rubbed my temples, trying to fight the overwhelming sensation that the room was spinning. You need to stop it, I said, my voice hoarse. You have to shut it down. Holloway's smile grew. You think you can stop it? It's too late for that, David. The song is alive now. It's already spreading. I'm not in control anymore, and neither are you. I took a step back, panic rising in my chest. No, I can fix this. I'll find a way. But Holloway's laugh echoed in the room, a laugh that sent a chill down my spine. The song doesn't need fixing, David. It needs to be heard. It needs to be played. I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt the cold weight of his words pressing against me, suffocating me. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, and I realized with a sudden, horrible clarity that Holloway wasn't here to help. He was here to guide me into the madness, to show me that there was no way out. I turned and ran, but as I reached the door, I heard it again. The song, louder now, closer, like it was following me. I had to get out. I had to escape. But I knew, deep down, that it was already too late. The song had found me. I stood there, in the center of the room, staring at the machine. It hummed, a low, steady pulse, like a heartbeat. The sound felt wrong, unnatural. The walls were lined with old radios, their glass eyes blank and staring, while wires snaked from one to the next, forming a tangled mess of connections. At the heart of it all sat a twisted contraption, built from a combination of radio equipment, human bones, and cables. It was like something you'd see in a nightmare, something that didn't belong in the waking world. Holloway's voice still echoed in my head. The song is a door. Once opened, it cannot be closed. His words hung in the air, twisting around my thoughts, making everything feel heavier, more real than it should be. The choice he gave me felt impossible. Destroy it, David, Holloway had said, his voice fractured and distant. But you'll have no idea what you'll unleash. Or let it play, and the town is lost forever. His eyes flickered in and out of focus, like a broken television, and I could see his lips barely moving, but the words were clearer than I had ever heard them. Either way, you can't escape it. The song will follow. I didn't know which decision would lead to the least disaster. I had come here to stop this madness. I had come here to protect Haydenfield, to protect myself. But now, standing face to face with the origin of it all, it felt like there was no way out. The machine before me pulsed again, louder this time. I could feel the song vibrating in the air, as if it was inside me, clawing at the back of my mind, begging me to listen. No, I couldn't. I couldn't give in. But what if the song was already in me? I had heard it in my sleep, in the streets, in the quiet corners of my mind. The town was already changing. Sam was gone. The mayor had become a hollow version of himself. People were disappearing, vanishing into thin air, as if they had never existed. The town felt like a place that wasn't supposed to be here, a place trapped in a loop of time that I couldn't understand. I stepped closer to the machine, my boots heavy on the floor. The air felt thick, suffocating. Every instinct told me to smash it, to break the wires, to tear everything apart. But the thought of what might happen if I did, what might come through, what might slip out of the radio's reach, kept me frozen in place. David, Holloway's voice whispered again, this time softer, more desperate. If you destroy it, you'll make the song real. It will be alive, and it will never leave. It will be in every mind, in every thought, every heartbeat. It will take over the world. I felt sick, my stomach turning as the reality of his words sank in. The town had already been infected, but I didn't want to be the one to spread it. I couldn't let it become more than this, more than just Haydenfield. There was too much at stake now. I had to make a choice. I looked around the room. The radios, the wires, the strange machine. It all felt like it belonged in some twisted, forgotten place of history. A place where no one was supposed to find it. And yet here I was, standing on the edge of making a decision that could determine everything. Everything. The song began again, louder this time, filling my ears with its distorted melody. The beat thumped in my chest, like it was calling me, pulling me in. I had to get away. I had to stop it. I reached for the nearest radio, my hands trembling. The song blasted out, louder than ever, filling the room with its maddening tune. It was everywhere now. It was inside me. I could feel it in my skin, in my bones, in my very soul. How could I escape it? And then, like a flicker in the dark, I realized something. The only way to stop it from spreading, to stop it from getting out, was to destroy the machine. But doing so would come with a price. I didn't know what would happen, didn't know if the thing I would unleash would be worse than the song itself. But I had no choice. There was no other option left. I grabbed a metal rod from the corner of the room and swung it at the machine. The first strike barely made a dent, but the second shattered the casing. Sparks flew, and the hum grew into a deafening roar. The machine screeched, as if protesting its own destruction. And then, everything went quiet. For a moment, there was nothing. The song had stopped. The hum that filled the air gone. I stood in the silence, heart pounding in my chest, waiting for something, anything to happen. But as the silence stretched on, I realized something was wrong. Something was missing. It wasn't over. I turned and ran toward the door, but before I could reach it, I heard a voice. My own voice. It came from the radio, from the broken machine, and it was whispering. David, it's never truly gone. It finds new singers. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The song hadn't stopped. It was still there, buried deep inside me, and now it was playing in my head. A low hum, just beneath my thoughts. I stumbled back, my knees shaking. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. I couldn't escape it anymore. The song, it had become a part of me, threading itself into my thoughts, my memories, like a whisper that would not stop echoing. At first I fought it. I thought I could pull myself back, resist the pull of that looping melody. But now, I'm not so sure I ever had control at all. The decision haunted me. Should I destroy the machine? Should I let the song play and hope it was just a phase, a temporary madness that would fade? Holloway's eyes burned into mine, flickering with something. Was it a warning? A promise? His words were like static in my head, warping, bending reality, until I couldn't remember what was real anymore. I looked at the machine. The hum of it filled the air, thick and oppressive, crawling up my spine. I knew if I destroyed it, I might set something worse loose. I might even be too late already. But if I let it continue, if I let the song spread, the song, it was everywhere now. I could hear it through the walls, beneath the sound of my own breath. The frequency gnawed at my nerves. I looked back at Holloway. His mouth barely moved, but I could hear him, couldn't escape hearing him. The door is open, he whispered, his voice a crackle of static. And now it cannot be closed. I felt the floor beneath me shift, a faint tremor in my legs. Not from fear. No, it was something deeper, something crawling inside my chest. The song was inside me now. My own thoughts were no longer my own. I reached out for the machine, my hand trembling, not sure if I was even controlling it. It was like the machine was reaching for me, pulling me closer. I could hear its hum, its rhythm, twisting in my mind. I pressed my fingers against the cold metal. It felt like a heartbeat, alive, breathing, pulling me in. And then, just like that, I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't David Carter anymore. There was a flash of light, a burst of static, and the song filled every crevice of my mind. It was louder now, so loud it drowned out my own thoughts, my own memories. I couldn't remember the last time I wasn't hearing it. The world around me felt like it was dissolving, slipping through my fingers. Was I still standing? Was I still David? The song had won. It had taken everything, my past, my future, and my identity. I could no longer tell where I ended and the song began. The air around me thickened, and the hum swirled in my ears. I stumbled backward, my legs unsteady, but the world wasn't moving with me anymore. The room, the bunker, Holloway. Everything around me was fading, warping, disappearing into the static of the song. I could feel the pull of it, deeper now, dragging me down. Holloway's face, blurry and distant, flickered before me. His mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear him over the song. His eyes locked on mine, but they were empty. Holloway was already gone. The room collapsed into a blur. I felt my knees buckle, my body sinking into the floor. The song consumed me, wrapped around my soul, turning everything dark and heavy. I didn't scream. I didn't have the energy to scream. The song had taken it from me. There was no pain, no terror, just nothing, just the song. It was all that was left. When I opened my eyes again, everything was different. The world was still there, but it felt wrong, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. I didn't know how much time had passed. The room was silent now, but the song, oh, it was still there. It was inside me, around me, pressing down on everything. I tried to stand, but I couldn't move. The static in my head was too loud, too all-encompassing. I couldn't focus. The town, Haydenfield, was gone. The people, were they gone too? I tried to remember their faces. I tried to remember my own name. But all I could hear was the song. It was everywhere now. The radio, the air, the ground. It was in the trees, in the streets, in the whispers of the wind. The song was part of the world. It was part of me. And it was never going to stop. I was never going to stop. I don't know how long I've been standing here, lost in the static. All I know is that I can still hear it. That same haunting melody, looping in my mind. And now I'm part of it. Somewhere, out there, I think I hear the song calling to others. It's spreading. It always was. And in that moment, I realize the song never needed to be stopped. It needed to be heard.